Maggie Hullbrook was fired for having too big a heart. When she secretly fixed a heartbroken boy's bicycle using her own money and company time, her boss terminated her on the spot. With rent due and her daughter to feed, Maggie's act of kindness had cost her everything. Then, at sunrise, her phone rang with news that would change her life forever. Fairfield County had never been kind to single mothers, a fact Maggie had learned the hard way after burying her husband 3 years ago. David's heart had given out suddenly one cold October morning while hauling timber at the local mill, leaving Maggie with a mountain of medical bills, a 7-year-old daughter, and memories that ached like phantom limbs. The life insurance had barely covered the funeral and medical expenses, forcing Maggie to downsize from their small rental house to a 2-bedroom apartment in the older part of town, where the rent was cheaper, but the ceilings leaked when it rained. The bicycle repair skills that had once been just a hobby she shared with David became her lifeline. Pinewood Bicycles had hired her because Vernon Tucker, the perpetually red-faced owner, knew she could rebuild a transmission with her eyes closed, not because he had any sympathy for her situation. "I'm running a business, not a charity," he reminded her every time she asked for an advance on her paycheck. His warning hung in the humid air of the shop 5 days a week, like the smell of chain grease and rubber. For 3 years, Maggie had been the first to arrive and the last to leave, never complaining when Tucker paid the male mechanics $2 more per hour despite her superior repair record. She'd become an expert at stretching a dollar, cooking large batches of stew that could last 3 dinners, hemming Jessica's pants by hand when she outgrew them, and picking up odd repair jobs on the weekend. The coffee can in her kitchen, labeled Jessica's College Fund, held exactly $34,623. Not nearly enough, but a start. It was during the hottest week of June when Tyler Mitchell showed up outside Pinewood Bicycles, a skinny 10-year-old with red-rimmed eyes and a mangled blue Schwinn that looked like it had been run over by a truck. As Maggie would later learn, that's exactly what had happened. "Can you fix it?" Tyler asked, his voice wobbling dangerously as Maggie stepped outside for her lunch break. "My dad gave it to me before he deployed. Mom says we can't afford a new one." Maggie knelt down to examine the bike. It was a limited edition retro Schwinn Stingray, the kind they don't make anymore, custom modified with engraved handlebars showing Tyler's name and his father's military unit decals on the frame and a Special Army star painted on the chain guard. The front wheel was twisted beyond repair, the frame bent at an awkward angle, and the handlebars were barely attached. A small patch from his father's unit was carefully secured under the seat, protected in a waterproof covering. "What happened, sweetheart?" Maggie asked gently. "I left it at the end of our driveway, and Mr. Wilson's logging truck clipped it when he was making a delivery next door," Tyler explained. "Dad spent months finding this exact model and customizing it for me. He said it's just like the one he had when he was my age, but made special just for me. It's one of the only things I have from him until he comes home." Maggie glanced through the shop window. Tucker was on the phone, his back turned. The repair would require parts they didn't have in stock. Parts Maggie knew Tucker wouldn't order without payment up front. "I was supposed to ride it in the 4th of July parade," Tyler continued, a tear sliding down his freckled cheek. "Dad might get to watch on video chat if his unit isn't on patrol." Something shifted in Maggie's chest, a familiar ache that came whenever she thought about Jessica growing up without David cheering at her school plays or teaching her to drive. Before she could stop herself, Maggie heard herself say, "I'll fix it for you, Tyler. Bring it around to the service entrance after we close at 6. Tyler's face lit up. "Really? How much will it cost?" Maggie thought about the electricity bill sitting unpaid on her kitchen counter, the approaching rent deadline, and Jessica's request for new sneakers for the new school year. "Don't worry about that," she said, ruffling his hair. "Just bring the bike." That evening, after Tucker left and she'd locked the front doors, Maggie let Tyler in through the back. She assessed the damage more thoroughly under the shop lights, making a mental list of everything she'd need. The front wheel was a total loss. The frame needed straightening in their hydraulic press, and the handlebars would need to be replaced entirely. "I need to order some parts," she told Tyler. "Can you come back on Friday afternoon?" "But the parade is Saturday," Tyler said, worry clouding his face again. "No, buddy, I'll have it ready, I promise." After Tyler left, Maggie drove to Harlow's Hardware and spent $83.47 of her grocery money on parts Tucker didn't stock. Nearly a day's wages gone on a bike that wasn't even her responsibility. The specialized parts for the limited edition, Stingray, were particularly expensive, but she refused to cut corners. For the next 3 evenings, Maggie stayed late at the shop, carefully rebuilding the Schwinn piece by piece after Tucker had gone home. She straightened the frame, replaced the wheel, carefully restored the engraving on the handlebars, and even touched up the Army star on the chain guard with matching paint. By Friday afternoon, the bike looked almost new, with all its special customizations intact. When Tyler came to pick it up, his eyes widened with disbelief. "It looks better than before," he exclaimed, running his hand over the freshly painted frame. "Wait until I tell Dad." The boy was so excited that neither of them heard the front door open. "What the hell is going on here?" Tucker's voice cracked through the workshop like a bullwhip. Maggie turned to see her boss standing in the doorway, face contorted with anger. "Mr. Tucker," she began, "I was just using my shop, my equipment, and company time for free repairs." Tucker cut her off. "After I've specifically told you we don't do charity work." "I paid for all the parts myself," Maggie explained. "And I did most of the work after hours." "Most, but not all," Tucker retorted. "I checked the security footage. You've been working on this during your lunch breaks for days." He turned to Tyler. "Take your bike and go, kid." Tyler looked at Maggie uncertainly. She nodded reassuringly, and he wheeled the bike toward the door, pausing only to whisper, "Thank you, Miss Hullbrook." Once Tyler was gone, Tucker turned back to Maggie. "I've overlooked a lot because you're a decent mechanic, but this crosses the line. When you're on my clock, you work on paying jobs. Period. That boy's father is serving overseas," Maggie said, her voice steady, despite the knot in her stomach. "His bike was a gift." "Not my problem," Tucker interrupted. "What is my problem is an employee who can't follow simple instructions. Clear out your toolbox. You're fired." Maggie hadn't seen the small crowd of customers who had gathered by the service counter, drawn by Tucker's raised voice. Among them was a tall man in his 50s, wearing a faded denim shirt, quietly observing the confrontation. As Maggie packed her tools with trembling hands, trying to calculate how long her last paycheck would stretch, the man approached Tucker. "Excuse me," he said, "but I've been waiting for someone to look at my bike chain." His voice carried the easy confidence of someone used to being heard. Tucker's demeanor changed instantly. "Of course, sir. Let me get one of our mechanics right on that. Actually, the man said, glancing at Maggie, I was hoping she could take a look. I watched her work just now. She's got a real touch with these machines. I'm afraid Ms. Hullbrook no longer works here, Tucker said stiffly. That's a shame, the man replied. In my experience, people with that kind of skill and heart are hard to find. He handed Tucker a business card. Jackson Whitfield. I own Whitfield Manufacturing over in Cooperville. Tucker's eyes widened slightly at the name. Whitfield Manufacturing was one of the largest employers in the state. Why don't you reconsider your decision? Whitfield suggested. Tucker glanced at the card, then at Maggie, clearly torn between pride and the desire not to offend an important potential customer. Pride won. I'm afraid that's not possible, Mr. Whitfield. Company policy. Whitfield nodded thoughtfully. I understand. Policies are important. He turned to Maggie. Ms. Hullbrook, was it? When you're finished here, I'd like to speak with you outside. 15 minutes later, Maggie emerged from Pinewood Bicycles for the last time, her toolbox heavy in her arms. Whitfield was leaning against a sleek black pickup truck in the parking lot. That was quite something in there, he said as she approached. I'm sorry you had to see that, Maggie replied, embarrassed. Don't be. I saw a master craftsman and a person of character. He nodded toward her toolbox. Need a ride home? Under normal circumstances, Maggie would never accept a ride from a stranger, but something about Whitfield's direct gaze told her she could trust him. Besides, the thought of walking 5 blocks with her heavy toolbox in the June heat was daunting. That would be very kind. Thank you, she said. During the short drive to her apartment building, Whitfield asked about her background and how she'd learned to repair bicycles. My husband taught me, Maggie explained. He could fix anything with wheels. After he passed, it became more than a hobby. And the boy with the bike, Tyler. His dad's deployed with the Army. That bike was special to both of them, a limited edition retro Schwinn that his father customized just for him. The man spent months tracking down that exact model, then added all these personal touches, engraved handlebars, unit patches, the works. It's practically irreplaceable. Whitfield nodded thoughtfully as he pulled up to her building. You know, when I was Tyler's age, I had a Schwinn Stingray, just like that one. Not the fancy customized version, but that same model. Used it on my paper route, earned my first dollars on that bike. He reached into his pocket and handed her a business card. If you're looking for work, Miss Hullbrook, give me a call. Maggie took the card, noticing the embossed logo and title. Jackson Whitfield, CEO. Thank you, Mr. Whitfield, but I'm not looking for charity. Neither am I, he replied with a smile. I'm looking for skilled people who understand that business is about more than the bottom line. Think about it. That night, after Jessica was asleep, Maggie sat at her small kitchen table, surrounded by bills. Without her job, they had maybe 3 weeks before they'd face eviction. The local news played quietly on the ancient TV in the corner, background noise to distract from her racing thoughts. And now, a local story that's catching attention online, the anchor was saying. A Fairfield County bicycle mechanic was fired today for fixing a deployed soldier's son's customized bicycle free of charge. Maggie's head snapped up. To her horror, there on screen was cell phone footage of her confrontation with Tucker. One of the customers must have recorded it. The clip showed Tucker yelling, followed by Maggie's calm explanation about Tyler's father and the special bike he'd customized for his son, then ended with Tucker's dismissive, "Not my problem" line. The video has been shared thousands of times, the anchor continued, with many commenting on the limited edition restored Schwinn Stingray visible in the background, the mechanic's kindness, and the shop owner's response. "We're working to identify the individuals involved." Maggie turned off the TV, her face burning. The last thing she needed was to become some viral sensation when she should be focusing on finding a new job. She went to bed with a headache, hoping the story would quickly fade from the public's fickle attention. Sleep came fitfully, interrupted by worries about bills and job applications. She had finally fallen into a deeper sleep when the shrill ring of her phone jolted her awake. The bedside clock read 5:47 a.m. An early morning light was just beginning to filter through the thin curtains. "Hello," she answered, groggily. "Hullbrook." It was Mrs. Fincher, her elderly neighbor from the first floor. "I'm sorry to wake you, but there's something you should see outside. There are people gathering in the parking lot. Nice people, and nice cars. One of them asked me if this is where Maggie Hullbrook lives." "What?" Maggie sat up, suddenly alert. "Who are they?" "I'm not sure, dear, but there must be at least a dozen. One gentleman said something about millionaires." "Millionaires?" Maggie repeated, certain she had misheard. "Yes, that's what he said. There are 17 millionaires outside waiting to speak with Ms. Hullbrook. I thought you should know before Jessica wakes up." "Thank you, Mrs. Fincher. I'll be right down." Maggie threw on jeans and a t-shirt, quickly braided her hair, and peeked into Jessica's room to make sure she was still asleep before hurrying downstairs. What she saw in the parking lot made her stop short. At least a dozen expensive vehicles, ranging from luxury sedans to high-end pickup trucks, were parked in a semicircle around the building's entrance. Men and women in business casual attire stood in small groups, talking quietly among themselves. In the center stood Jackson Whitfield, who smiled when he spotted her. "Miss Hullbrook," he called, walking toward her. "I hope we didn't wake you too early." "Mr. Whitfield," Maggie replied, bewildered. "What is all this?" "These are friends of mine," he said, gesturing to the gathered crowd. "We're all part of a small foundation called Pay It Forward. Each of us was helped by someone who expected nothing in return at a critical moment in our lives. Now we do the same for others." A woman in her 60s stepped forward. "Eleanor Timont," she introduced herself. "I own Timont Orchards. 40 years ago, a kind mechanic fixed my delivery truck for free when I couldn't afford repairs. That saved my first harvest. When Jackson showed us that video of you last night, I knew we had to come." One by one, the others introduced themselves. Business owners, entrepreneurs, and executives from across the state. Each shared a brief story of someone who had helped them when they were struggling. Some had received financial help, others mentorship, but all had benefited from unexpected kindness. "We've been pooling resources for years to help people like you," Whitfield explained. "People who do the right thing, even when it costs them." "I appreciate the gesture," Maggie said, "but I'm not looking for a handout." "Good," replied a tall man who had introduced himself as the owner of a regional trucking company. "Because we're not here to give you one. We're here to invest in you." "Invest?" Maggie repeated. Whitfield nodded. You see, Ms. Hullbrook, after our conversation yesterday, I did some research. You're not just good with bikes, you're exceptional. Your repair success rate at Pinewood was 17% higher than the industry average, and customers specifically requested you by name. Maggie blinked in surprise. Tucker had never shared that information with her. We have a proposition, Whitfield continued, handing her an envelope. First, a gift, no strings attached. Enough to cover your expenses while you consider the second part of our offer. Maggie opened the envelope and nearly dropped it when she saw the cashier's check inside. It was more money than she had seen in one place since David's life insurance payment. I can't accept this, she whispered. You already have, said Eleanor Timont with a gentle smile. The check is made out to you, and none of us will take it back. Consider it recognition for 3 years of being underpaid for your skills. And the second part? Maggie asked, still reeling. Whitfield gestured to a folder another member of the group was holding. We want to fund a new business, a community bicycle shop right here in Fairfield County, a place where quality repairs are done at fair prices, where kids can learn skills, and where no child is turned away because their family can't afford to pay. With you as the owner and head mechanic, added another member of the group, we provide the startup capital. You provide the expertise and heart. Why would you do this? Maggie asked, overwhelmed. You don't even know me. We know what matters, Whitfield replied. That video showed us everything we needed to see. A town that would let someone like you go is a town that needs you more than they realize. Maggie looked at the faces around her, successful people who had once been in positions similar to hers, who understood struggle and the value of unexpected kindness. For the first time since David died, she felt the weight on her shoulders begin to lift. I don't know what to say, she admitted. Say you'll consider it, Whitfield urged. Take the day. Talk to your daughter. Think it through. We'll meet again tomorrow to discuss details if you're interested. As the group prepared to leave, Maggie noticed a small figure standing on the apartment building's front steps. Jessica was watching wide-eyed, still in her pajamas. Mom, she called. What's happening? Maggie beckoned her daughter over, putting an arm around her shoulders. Remember when I told you that your dad always said, kindness matters more than money? Jessica nodded. Well, sometimes kindness finds its way back to you. Later that day, as Maggie and Jessica sat at their kitchen table discussing the incredible offer, a knock sounded at their door. Outside stood Tyler and his mother, holding a homemade thank you card and a small apple pie. We saw you on the news, Tyler's mother explained. We wanted to thank you properly. Tyler's bike video has over 1 million views now, she added. People are calling Pinewood Bicycles asking for the mechanic who helped the soldier's son. Mr. Tucker seems pretty upset about the whole thing. Maggie couldn't help but laugh. I bet he is. What will you do now? Tyler's mother asked. I heard some rich folks showed up here this morning. Maggie looked at Jessica, who was showing Tyler the preliminary sketches they'd made for the new bike shop, complete with a learning area for kids and a wall dedicated to military families. I'm going to build something, Maggie said with newfound confidence. Something David would have been proud of. 1 year later, Hometown Wheels celebrated its grand opening on Main Street. The shop featured a state-of-the-art repair center, a youth apprenticeship program, and a fleet of refurbished bikes available at low or no cost to families in need. On a wall of honor near the entrance hung a single limited edition Schwinn Stingray with custom engravings and military decals, donated by Tyler's family after his father returned safely from deployment. Underneath it, a simple plaque read, "For those who believe kindness matters more than money." Jackson Whitfield had been right. Sometimes doing the right thing costs everything, but sometimes, if you're lucky, it gives you back even more.